Welcome back to the Wedding Community Podcast. Today I am joined by Neal and Stephanie. Guys, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. How are you two doing today?
Ladies first.
I don't know who should go. I'm doing good. I mean, it's very, very hot out today, at least here. So it's, however, though, it's been a sunny day, so I'm good.
Yes, same. I did an outdoor event today, and it was extremely hot but windy.
My goal is when I ask a question, I'm like, I hope they just both answered at the same time. They're just like in sync that well, where they're just like at the exact same time say the same thing or something. But no, yeah, I can always call, or you can raise your hand if you want, just like in a classroom if we need to do that. So
it's always going to be ladies first.
Okay, well, I can do
just
that.
To clarify, it's
all right,
always going to be ladies.
We got
first.
an order down then. So awesome. So I thought it would be fun to bring you both on. So we met at a online networking wedding planner group during the summit, and you both happen to be from Canada area. We all kind of end up being in the same room, which was kind of fun. And it got me thinking. I was like, I don't know like a single thing really about Canada, especially not Canada weddings. And it made me think, like, I wonder how much is different, how much is the same. And so I thought it'd be really fun to bring both of you on, with one of you being a wedding planner, one of you being kind of a DJ entertainer. I was thinking there would be plenty that you could kind of chip in and show what's the difference and the same. And so before we kind of get into that topic, I would love for you to just introduce yourself and kind of give us a background on why you're in weddings and how you got started and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Stephanie, and I own New Berlin Weddings and Events. It's called New Berlin because I live in Kitchener-Waterloo area, and it used to be called New Berlin, basically. We have very deep German roots here. We host the second largest Oktoberfest in the world here, even though it hasn't happened for the last 2 years. And that's where I got started. I got started in the community. I love doing community events. I volunteer a lot. And ever since I was little, I watched my parents host different events. And I knew right from the get-go I was going to be an event planner. And I fell in love with weddings. I cry at every wedding, regardless. You find me in the back with my sunglasses on, just crying. And I love what I do. Like, you couldn't pay me to do anything else with more money because I just love what I do, and I love bringing so much happiness to these couples to bring their day to life because they've worked so hard, and then they hand it over to me and they're like, I'm gonna have a great day, which is exactly what they should do.
Yeah, I hope you're in the back crying for good reasons, not because it's so stressful of a day.
No, definitely good reasons. I'm just like so overwhelmed with like how happy they are. And like you can see people turning around being like, is she okay? And I'm like, just don't look at me.
Like, she's crying more than the bride. What's going on here?
Basically. Yeah.
For those who aren't watching us, Neal had some virtual Kleenexes to share. So
there you
appreciate that.
Awesome. So my name's Neal. I have been a DJ for, wow, it's going on 37 years. I started in middle school, high school, doing events, doing all kinds of stuff like that, moving on to corporate and bars. And then I took a hiatus to go be a dad and all that fun stuff for a little bit, and worked in the corporate world and realized that, being part of weddings is where I belong. And then that would be 2012, went back to weddings full time, and I've been doing it ever since. And I cry at many of them too, but it's more of a big scene because I'm a big fella, and when people see me, they're like, "What's going on there?" I say, "It's my allergies. I'm not crying. You're crying."
That's funny. So yeah, before we kind of get into the main topic, it'd be great to just kind of break the ice, learn a little bit more about you guys and your experience with the wedding. So don't have to think too hard on these questions. Just kind of give me your first answer. But first question for I have for you is, what is the best meal that you've had at a wedding?
Oh man. I've had it was like a 6-course meal. And I know it was like swanky. I was like, okay. And they had what is it called? Is it called ratatouille? Is that what it's
Hmm.
called?
Yeah.
Because I usually get the vegetarian option.
Hmm.
Even though I'm not vegetarian, but it was the best food I've ever had. But hands down. It was so good.
I'm gonna say that I don't eat red meat, so I'm always like the chicken guy or the veg, and that would be ratatouille was one of the best ones. It was vegetarian ratatouille, and it was really good. It was out in Pickering, Ontario. I remember that, but I just remember going like, "Wow, I'm getting spoiled here." So that would be my best one.
Yeah.
And what
Now,
about you, Travis?
oh man, I didn't know I had to answer my own question.
Well, you think you're just going to get off easy a question
You,
asking and not getting it back?
I know, right? So not the fanciest meals I've had, but the good thing about last year with the micro weddings is I had a lot of like backyard barbecue type meals or like catering that you wouldn't
Nice.
normally expect. So like pulled pork and like, just sweet corn on the cob and just like random things you wouldn't expect to have at a wedding. So that was definitely a highlight last year, was just the obscure food we were getting. Like one they had like a taco truck, that was
Hmm.
pretty cool. So it's kind of nice to be back with like the nice meals, on the venues, but it's like I'm already starting to get kind of like sick of them again. I'm like, I kind of miss the taco trucks and stuff that we had last
Yeah.
year. So
I had one. I had one in October, and they rolled in the taco truck. And we were speaking about it earlier, the tented one with the family, and they rolled in a taco truck like late night, and I was like, "Dude, I'm gonna put on a really long song to put on like Paradise by the Dashboard Light because that's 8 minutes, and I'm going to get me a taco." I came back with like 2 tacos. I was like, "This is heaven!" Like,
that's awesome. That's good. It's funny with those midnight snacks because a lot of times I don't see them. Usually I'm gone by then, but when I am, I'm like, man, that sounds like a really good idea to eat a bunch of pieces of pizza right now at 11 o'clock at night. And then as soon as I'm leaving the wedding, I'm like, that was a terrible mistake. I should not have done that.
why did I do that?
All right. And I'm going to flip it real quick for you guys too. So what's the worst meal that you've ever had at a wedding?
Oh boy. Um, I don't think like one stands out for me, but I've definitely had some dry chicken at a wedding, like sawing through it, and then just like drinking a bunch of water to try and like choke it down. Otherwise, I don't remember anything like super specific other than just dry chicken.
I remember doing a wedding, and literally, first of all, I DJ'd from a different room. I had speakers, like it was so small, there was that many guests that the speakers were out in the room, and I was in a different room. And in the other room, they sort of just gave you like sandwiches,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, really? And they were like dry chicken sandwiches, and you're like, mm. And I'm a diabetic. I have to eat. You like it or not, I have to eat. So I'm just like, oh, please. So, yeah, I would say that was probably my worst.
Yeah, here in the States, a lot of venues, especially in the city, like in Chicago, they love the box lunches. So when you were saying dried chicken, I was like, man, that sounds great compared to some of the things they've tried to feed us here. So we occasionally, I think we've been able to turn back everyone that we get, and they end up giving us a real meal. But we've gotten some, like we're waiting and waiting, we're hungry, it's been a long day. They have us go into a back room. We get to this back room, and there's these like brown boxes, and they're like usually like kind of like damp and like like moist or something, and then you open it up and it's got like this sandwich in it that's like warm to the touch, and it's like
Mhm.
deli meat and like mustard, and that's it. With like white bread and then some chips and a cookie, and that's like your meal. And so I've seen a few of those. When I started, I didn't know what to do with them, especially because usually I was shooting for someone, so I just ate it or I just waited till I got home. But as I've gotten kind of older and wiser, I make sure I discuss that ahead of time so that doesn't happen. And it's crazy. What I found too is sometimes the couple, they're paying for that and they're paying a discounted weight rate, quote unquote, and it's like
Yep.
$5 less than if they would have just got us like the real meal. So I always like talk to the couple ahead of time about that, because I mean, obviously I would like to eat real food. That is a plus, but I also feel bad that they're like being taken advantage of. And it's like, yeah, you could save $5 and we'll go to 7-Eleven and throw some stuff in a box and give it to your vendor.
Some
So
nachos and away
right.
you go. It's funny because there's, in regards to DJs in the States, I'm in a lot of networking groups, and there's a couple of DJs, larger ones that, not big fellas, but of larger companies, and they're like, you shouldn't eat as a DJ at an event. That's wrong. And as you see Stephanie's face, she's like, what are you talking about? So we're going to talk about timelines, and the difference is a lot of the weddings, depending on where you are, south, are DJs only playing for 4-5 hours. So in that instance, I understand, but up here, where like I'm at a 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock ceremony, and the lights don't turn back on until 1 a.m. So you know what I mean? Like, it's a big movement for DJs in the States, where they're like, you shouldn't eat, you shouldn't this and that because it looks bad. And I'm like, well, I'm there for 13 hours. You
Yeah.
don't want to have to get people to pick me up off the floor because I passed out. So
Yeah.
it's in my contract even about, I gotta have a meal. So it's funny because people don't think about, oh, you're there for X amount of time. And in regards to most labor laws, unless we're going back to other times, people should be taking breaks within like 4 or 5 hours. And as far as I know here, I don't know about in the States, but to me, it's, you know what I mean? When you think about the time that's being spent at the actual event.
Absolutely. I definitely think you should
Just
be
feed me
at
so I
the
don't.
event.
Yeah.
Yeah. The like hard and fast rule I'm against is like vendors drinking at weddings. I think that's super awful. I don't like it at all. Like
Tacky.
super tacky. But eating, absolutely.
Mhm.
Like if I usually try and get like a plate in the kitchen and eat in the kitchen,
Yeah.
so that they don't see me eating. But I can work up to 18 hours on a wedding day, and I
Exactly.
have
Yeah.
to eat at some point, or else I'm gonna just fall down.
Mhm.
And I'm not diabetic like you are, but after 18 hours of not eating, I'm gonna fall down.
Yeah, understandably. That's the thing. It's very funny because sometimes you get the couples that are like, oh, we have to feed you, and they don't think about it. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm not even counting my setup and
Yeah.
whatnot. I could be there for 14 hours. You know what I mean? If you include that, et cetera, through the day, it could be a long day. And they're like, oh, okay. Don't get me wrong. I pack my snacks.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I always have
and
a
I,
lunch
and I
bag full
have a
of
big
snacks.
I have a big facade, so I can hide behind it, and nobody sees me if they give me a meal. So it's not like I'm sitting there at a table. That I always find weird, like when they put you like right out in the middle with all the vendors, and you're like,
So I know you guys were kind of talking about timelines. So I would love to kind of start there when it comes to weddings and see if there are any differences between a Canadian or, States wedding, or if it's all kind of the same. So what does a wedding day normally look like? Now, I know you were saying like Neal, it sounds like usually the DJ is there like all day, whereas like I do know sometimes the DJ will be there all day with us, but a lot of times it's like a, ceremony at a church, so the DJ is not really needed till the party starts. So I would love to just kind of see what the timeline looks like on a normal wedding day for you guys.
Yeah. It honestly, it depends on the client. I find I do a lot of non-traditional weddings. So I don't do a lot of church services. Usually they do their ceremony where their reception is. So it ranges depending on what type of food they want. So if they want the sit down dinner, I always recommend like a 1 to 2 ceremony time so that they can, have their ceremony, depending on how long that is, depending on, their religion, tradition, whatever they do want to do. And then they have time for photos and then a cocktail hour and then dinner, speeches, and then usually like 9 o'clock is dancing and drinking time. Like universally here, usually. Depending if the speeches go long. Sometimes that can be pushed back an hour or two if the speeches do go long. But dinner's usually 5 or 6, and that hasn't changed much for the weddings I do, unless they're doing hors d'oeuvres in the evening, which is more like 7 o'clock.
Yes, what she said. No, it's basically the same. I think that where we are, we're basically the same as like in East Coast, New York, New Jersey, predominantly. And it's exactly that same way. So for me, personally, majority of the stuff that I do can be ceremonies, even in the church. I could be doing sound support for that, or they could be doing it in a non-traditional at a hotel, or you know, I mean, some other venue, and I could be doing sound for that. And so it could be again anywhere from 12 or 1 o'clock ceremony, moving on to cocktail. When they're at cocktail, when the guests are at cocktail, we could be doing pictures at that time.
Yep.
Or it could be just a straight break. We'll see you later. We'll see you in a couple hours.
Yeah.
That happens too, where you got married here, come back in 3 hours, and we'll see you at the other place for a 5 o'clock dinner. So then we're doing our grand entrance and all that other stuff that we would do, a toast, and then so I've been kind of leaning towards the couples that I have to do things a little bit differently sometimes, just to mix it up. One of my Nealisms, as it were, is I try not to make receptions a spectator sport. So we kind of mix it up and do maybe things that would be together. So a parent's speech, parents dance. Another parent speech, parents dance. And that way you mix it up a little bit more, as opposed to it's all the speeches and we're all just sitting there like this, and then people are dozing off, and then they're not in the mood to dance, or whatever the case may be. They don't want to be entertained because they've been sitting there for 5 hours to listening to both sets of parents. Do you know what I mean? And grandparents, and then the wedding couple, or whatever the case may be. So I always try to make it as mixed up and entertaining as possible, without losing our minds. I don't go crazy, but so that we're able to just have people interact and have different things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And what does the timeline look like in the US then? Is it very similar?
Yeah, it sounds like it's pretty similar. So like and I don't know if you guys see this like with different territories, but like I think Neal is kind of saying there's kind of like New Jersey style or whatever. Like I found that's a little bit different than like in the Midwest, where Midwest, it's kind of what you were talking about, where we try to kind of lump things together. And so for better or worse, that's kind of the route that they usually go. But especially in Chicago in particular, there's a lot of different like kind of cultures and stuff. And so, I mean, you see a lot of like Catholic ceremonies, you know, and so like you have your typical day where it's like, especially like I'll just use kind of past weekend for example. So I had a Polish wedding, and so it's like very early start. You know, they get ready. They a lot of times do a first look. There's like a blessing they do. So there's all these like traditions that they do, and then when we get to the ceremony, it's your normal Catholic mass, but then there's even some extra traditions they throw in there, and so it's a very long day. And it seems like usually when it's like Polish, Italian, German, you know, like if it's kind of like they have these cultural things they do, it's a very long wedding day no matter what, which is good for the most part, because even though it's a long day, you know that you're not going to feel rushed going anywhere. Whereas like kind of like couples that maybe they don't have like a certain kind of heritage, or like, one kind of comes from one background, one's from another, or they're like non-religious. They try to kind of lump everything into 8 hours for some reason. At 8 hours is like always the sweet spot. And so like, it's the same amount of stuff we're doing, but it's like in 8 hours instead of 12 hours. And so they try to crunch it all in there. So we're like running around all day. We're late to everything. But it somehow like all comes together. And so that's definitely like a common thing that we see is this. There's still, I don't know what you guys kind of find on this side, but even when couples like maybe are having the ceremony reception all at the same location, maybe they're not like particularly like religious or anything, they still don't want to do a first look. And so what we end up running into a lot of times is there's not enough time for photos, because it's like, we don't want to do a first look, but our ceremony is literally an hour before cocktail hour starts, but we also want to enjoy our cocktail hour. And so, we'll try to advise them like, hey, you're either going to need to do your ceremony earlier, and the venue usually doesn't allow that. So if you can't do that, you need to do a first look. But they're like, well, I don't want them to see me till the ceremony, and so then we end up in this really tight situation with the schedule. So I think there is a lot of that cramming that happens in the States. I don't know if you guys run into that too, where it's like they want to fit like a 12-hour wedding day into like a 6-hour package or something.
Yeah, no, definitely I always try and tell them like, hey, your photos are going to take up a huge chunk of your day if you want your photos to look good. So I always suggest a first look now, unless they're really keen on seeing each other in the aisle. I think a first look is super cute. Then you get those photos too.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, I find a lot of situations you can run into, we want, ceremony at 3, cocktail at 4, dinner at 5. And I'm like, unfortunately, you have to sit down with them and be like, time doesn't move like that at a wedding. It moves so much slower. Getting anywhere feels like it takes 20 minutes. And even trying to get dinner out or something, it's going to take longer than you think it does. The servers aren't magic. They can't like fling the tables, like the food to your table right away. And if you want any of those photos, you have to make time for them. And I always say you should add an extra like 30 minutes to everything. Just if you're early, nobody knows. If you're late, nobody knows. The only person who knows your timeline is you and probably me, your wedding coordinator. So I think it's just like, as for a tip, just add 30 minutes to everything, and then you'll be on time, or you'll be early and it'll be even better.
That's so funny because I do the exact same thing. I do the exact, and I tell them all the time, like, okay, so this is your timeline, but what's really going to happen is you're going to get stuck in traffic coming from here to here on a Saturday afternoon. So when you're struggling to get to the park or wherever you want to take your pictures, and your guests are sitting at the venue twiddling their thumbs, eating the antipasta or hors d'oeuvres or whatever they're waiting for, nothing's happening. It's background, you know what I mean? So I always tell people, don't get married to your timeline. That's another Nealism. Don't get married to it, and don't sweat it. Make sure that the people that you hire, the vendors, that are people that you aren't just cheap, but people that you trust, so that you can just worry about you and your partner getting married, and we'll handle all the behind the scenes stuff, and we'll buffer in that half an hour for you. Do you know what I mean? So that
Absolutely.
We know traffic's going to be this or food's going to be that. There's one thing I've always, as a former server, I've always been afraid of, is messing with the chef. So I build my timeline from where the chef, and I say, what time's dinner supposed to be? Oh, it's supposed to be 6 o'clock. Okay, I'll count backwards and build that way, because there's nothing worse than food coming out, as we were saying, in meals that have been sitting under heat lamps waiting for their stage presence. Their time for them to be served.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I refuse to get in a chef's way or a caterer's way. Like, what time are you serving? I'll be poof, gone. Whatever you need, you can find me, but just whatever you need, we'll do, because the food needs to be on time.
Exactly. And I've had some chefs say, well, it's, you guys are here early, blah, 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 blah. And that's where I come in as an entertainer. And I'm like, well, they always say, comedians always say they have these bits or something, and then I'll come in and do a game or something where we're going to buy time, something interactive, something fun, and you know what I mean? They're going to be able to at least not sit there and think, where's my food? Where's my food? Something's happening. Something up there on stage is happening. Let me watch that for a minute or two while the delayed food makes its way out.
Yeah. I like to use, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I love to use ish time. So they'll give me their schedule and they're like, this is happening at 11. And I'm like, no, it's happening at 11 ish. You know, like we can't just guarantee that that's going to happen at 11. And then I think that kind of helps the couple understand that, you know, you just have to be flexible and have to understand that nothing's going to start until you're there. And it all revolves around you as a couple, not so much the timeline. So like, if you get to the ceremony 5 minutes late, it's fine. We'll pick up somewhere, you know, and hopefully like, you know, the officiant is aware of that. So maybe they'll cut out that joke that wasn't going to be funny anyhow, and you know, catch us up on time, and then we're all of a sudden, before you know it, we're like ahead of schedule again.
We're back. Exactly.
Definitely.
But
I mean, I can attest to East Coast or West Coast weddings, just because I've never personally done one. I've seen a lot of them, but I'm going to assume a lot of them are around the same timeline as us. The territories, no idea. They don't have much population up there, so I'm going to go with probably the same, but it probably depends on the season. And if it's winter, likely not.
Yeah. What are, because like in Canada, is there a wide variety of seasons, or is everyone kind of going through the same season?
Oh, you mean from different parts of Canada?
Yeah, like weather-wise, and does that kind of like
BC is different than where we are, 100%. Right?
Yeah, that's what I thought. So like the wedding seasons are probably kind of like how here, where I hear a lot of times like Texas, their hot season is, you know, well, hot is in like busy is like in the winter, and then summer it can kind of like slow down. Whereas like in Illinois, I don't do like anything in the winter because no one wants to get married when it's like -15. So like I'm guessing there's different areas in Canada that can kind of be like that too. So like if you're kind of working the whole area, you have basically different times where you'd be busy then.
Well, we're not doing, so sorry, you were saying you're not very familiar with Canada. So this is what I always tell people. Where we are basically where New York is.
Gotcha.
Like, and the other side of the country, BC, is basically Seattle. So whatever the weather is in Seattle, that's kind of the BC weather. So when it gets rainy, that season that they have over there, that's what they have, and nobody's getting married then. That's my understanding.
Unless they really like rain, I guess.
And and Canada's much bigger than the US, by the way.
Yeah.
So it's not like Stephanie and I are going to different provinces, which are states, different provinces, and going to different spots like that usually.
I typically don't change provinces. Like it's hard enough even in Ontario. Like if I'm going to Muskoka or somewhere up there, that's like a 4 or 5 hour drive for us, and we're still in the same province. Like that's a lot for us. I usually stay within like our whole region. I mean, I will go anywhere, but I typically don't go to Manitoba or Quebec, like our neighboring, but I mean, we could technically, but it'd be a really long drive. Like it's a good 12 hours.
It'd be pricey for them.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, because I could definitely see that being a difference too. Whereas like, so where I'm at in like near Chicago, I'm in the suburbs. So like we're only like an hour from the border of like Indiana and an hour from the border of Wisconsin. So like I do a lot of going to other states, but I would imagine with the provinces, like there's so much more spaced out. I mean, we do have obviously some states that are like that, like Texas. You wouldn't necessarily probably be like a, you know, southern Texas vendor and be going all the way up to like, you know, Missouri or something like that, like some state like nearby, because that's a long drive through the whole state. So I'm guessing it's kind of like that for you guys, but it's like every province is kind of like a Texas in a way.
Province. Yes, exactly that. Well, what does it take to get out of out of Ontario, something like 8 hours, I think it is.
At least 8 hours to get out of
Yeah.
Ontario. If you want to go to like BC or something, A, you want to take a plane.
That's a flight.
B, like it takes like I think 3-4 days to drive to BC.
Yep.
And then you have to drive through Saskatchewan. And that's
Well,
just boring.
You got to drive through the states if we're smart, because
Yes.
apparently it's quicker, right?
Yeah.
So you cross the whole, into a whole
Go
country
down, and then come back up.
and then
Yeah.
come back up to.
Then you don't have so many lakes to drive around, which is a huge issue here. Like the reason it takes us so long to get to Muskoka is because I have to drive around a numerous stupid amount of lakes to try and get there.
I don't have that many lakes, but
yeah. But you know what I mean? Like it's not a straight shot right up to Muskoka. It's
no.
Around the bend and around that lake and then up another body of water and
right.
Yeah. Do you guys find that you have to let's say you have a wedding coming up, do you often find they are kind of longer drives for you guys, or do you still get a lot of stuff that's very local though? Like there's still a lot of people getting married in your area?
The longest drive I've had is about 45 minutes.
Oh wow, okay. So it's not so there's plenty going around.
I'm on average, I average at least an hour circumference from where I am at. That brings me all the way to Niagara, and all the way back. So like just Pickering or whatever, and then north to almost Barrie. That's like majority of my area. But the August 1st we're talking about, that's 3 hours.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So I don't remember what it's called, South Range or Sun Range or something. But so I do that, and I've done destination. Of course, is always a big one. I used to just plug that like crazy because I was like, I just want a trip. So destination is something that I always. What did we do? 2019, Cuba, Jamaica.
Nice.
Well, Jamaica was kind of cheating. It was my cousins, but I got to visit family and stuff like that. Cuba was a cousin as well, so we got to. I was like, "So who's playing the music for you?" And they were like, "The venue." I'm like, "I got you." So it ended up being part of my deal, so I can say I DJ'd a wedding in Cuba. You know what I mean? It's always cool to put those things on the resume.
Oh, absolutely. And how far have you driven, Travis?
The farthest we've had is South Carolina, which is like 14 hours from where we're at. So we could have taken a plane, probably would have been a lot easier, but we wanted to kind of stop. So along that route is also like the Smoky Mountains and some other stops. So we kind of made like a trip out of it. But normally we're not going too much more than like an hour or two. That's kind of the funny thing about Chicagoland though, because you were saying like the longest you've gone is 45 minutes. Well, like 45 minutes to most people is still like Chicago, like, so even though it's Chicago, the city itself really doesn't take up that much area, but all the suburbs kind of get looped into that Chicagoland. So like, I might be going all the way out to some suburb super far west, and the couple would still consider themselves from Chicago, even though they're like 2 hours from Chicago, like it's just kind of the way it goes. And so we have to kind of be ready to drive all over the place. And it's kind of fun in some ways because you see a wide variety of weddings. Like obviously every state weddings can be a little bit different. Like a beach wedding in Florida is going to be different than a wedding in the mountains in like Colorado or something. Yeah. But even in Illinois, you see a lot of that too, where I'm in the suburbs, like right in between like country land and like the city. So like I'll have one weekend where I'm downtown in the city, super high-end hotel, your typical kind of like fancy wedding. Next weekend I'm out in like some cornfield farm whatever venue, and the groomsmen are shooting off guns, and like it's just like it's so totally different. And it's cool that way, but then it's like it's cool too because those are only like 2 hours apart from each other, you know? And so like you could go an hour one way, you're going to have a totally different wedding than an hour the other way.
That's so interesting.
I find that for me, I get a lot of, well, my thing is being able to DJ for couples of various backgrounds. Growing up in the GTA the Greater Toronto area, there's so many, it's a big melting pot. So we get like so many different backgrounds for weddings. And I always say that's our big thing. That's my big thing as a DJ. I'll do a Polish wedding this week and an Italian wedding the next week and a Jewish wedding after that. And that, you know what I mean? There's some years where I'm just like, I didn't do the same people at all for the whole wedding season, right? I've done Chinese and then I've done Indian and that sort of thing. So Trinidadian, like Caribbean people and all kinds. There's a big mix.
And those weddings are the best. So
Yeah.
And it's nice that you can put that on your resume too, because I know there are a lot of people who don't have or haven't done or had the opportunity to be able to offer that type of service. So it's nice knowing that you've done it, you've tried it, you kind of took the steps to learn about it.
Yes, that's the thing. A lot of people don't get that. So today, again, I was doing an event, and in our area, there were a lot of people of Indian descent, Indian background. So I played a lot of a big, probably about 25% of Punjabi music, and people were like coming up to me and like, "This is fantastic. Are you Indian? Are you?" And I was like, "No, I love music, and I can make it work." And they were like, "Oh, and you blended that with this and that," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's what I do. Here's my card."
That's great. So like here in the States, a lot of different like states, basically you kind of find different budgets and different pricing and stuff. So I'm kind of curious if it's like that in Canada as well, because like it seems like too, like with the States, it revolves around major cities. So like, you know, in Chicago or in New York or LA, it's pretty common to maybe be able to charge, you know, 4,000 plus for like photography or 4,000 plus for video. But then you start getting into like maybe the smaller towns and their budgets are going to be much lower and the expectation is much lower and the venue is probably not as fancy. And so I was kind of curious if like you guys have kind of found that there's certain areas that are associated with having higher budgets. You know, if you guys have a general idea of like what's the average wedding budget in Canada, and does it matter per where they're at, kind of like it is here too?
Well, that's a difficult question here because you range from, you know, Toronto, in my opinion, has a higher budget range. People who live in Toronto are a lot like, for lack of better term, a lot like New York. And they're living in the city for a reason. There's swanky venues, fancy caterers. If you've made it in Toronto. But then if you come to like Peel region, which Neal is in, or like Kitchener-Waterloo, they're kind of more your average Joes around here. I mean, there's lots of rich people around here, obviously, as well, but more of your average Joes. So I want to say weddings range from about 15 to 30K. I'm very surprised when people do weddings for less than 15 and impressed. Just because I know how much all the vendors cost in venues, but if they are, I'm very impressed. But I would say like between 15 and 30 is usually the budget I see.
Yeah, according to my friend Google, the average cost of a 2020 Ontario wedding was 30,714. So, you're like, you nailed it. And it's exactly what Stephanie said. Like, where I'm originally from, actually Toronto. So, and our website is the Toronto Wedding DJ, Instagram, blah 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 blah. So we cater to that demographic, as it were, but our office is in Peel region, and so we get a lot of people who are like, "How much are you charging? What?" Do you know what I mean? I'm like, that's what it is, and these are the reasons why. This is my experience. This is what's going to happen if
Absolutely.
you hire me. Like, yada yada yada, and once you educate people, you let them figure it out. What's more important, the experience of having a vendor who will do the job you want and make it a memorable event, or stick to the budget. And so people stick to the budget, and I wish them all the best. I always do. And 9 out of 10 times I hear after, oh, we should have went with you. So.
And I find that is the consensus a lot, because
That they should have went with me. Yes.
And people, I find that like the dollar signs get in the way a lot, which I totally respect, because not everyone is made of money.
Absolutely.
But it is hard sometimes if you want to, you have, your wedding on one side and the money on another, and they don't really fit together sometimes, and they should go hand in hand. But sometimes it's like, I want this wedding with pure peonies and all my stuff rented, and a 6-course dinner with a photographer who's going to be there from sunrise to sunset, and a DJ who's going to do it all for $10K. And you're like, no. If you do, please tell me how. But like, it's just unrealistic. So I try and, when I talk to clients, is we discuss a budget and their vision and how they're going to go hand in hand, because sometimes you can get carried away, and that's okay, because everyone has they have no idea that they're not in this industry like we are. And that's totally understandable. And that's what all of us are here for, is to talk to them about those things.
Yeah. I was kind of curious because Neal looked up Toronto, and the average of New York is like 60,000 for a wedding, and then Chicago's we're behind them, but it's like 50,000. But in the suburbs, the average is a little more like 30 to 40,000, which I could totally believe, because I feel like a majority of your budget goes towards parking in Chicago. So you're probably like, if you're paying for all your guests, like probably like 10,000 of that's probably like just the parking or something.
Oh my
so
gosh.
maybe not really that much, but like I wouldn't be surprised, because it's expensive, like having a Chicago wedding. Like everything's just more expensive. The venues, usually the vendors have to charge more, because you think of a DJ and you have to, loading in at this outdoor barn wedding where you just literally pull up to the venue and you're there all day, is a lot different than loading into like a hotel where you have to go through security and go through the back door and all these other complications that come with it. So yeah, I can definitely see how it'd be, more expensive than it would be in the suburbs. But yeah, it's interesting, like how it kind of can vary, but it sounds like it's overall it's like kind of similar, where if you're in a kind of city, it's typically just going to be more for a wedding, so vendors can maybe charge more. But as you kind of like expand out from the city, the pricing and the budgets for weddings drastically start to change.
And it's funny that way, because of the area that I do is so wide. So my price is my price.
Yeah.
And my price is my price in Kitchener. My price is my price in London. My price is my price in Niagara Falls. My price is my price in Toronto, in Peel, going all across. It is what it is, and that's all that it is.
Yeah.
And so you a lot of times you get people that are like, oh, but that guy's charging a lot less. And like I said, it's you and I understand that. If you can't afford it, you can't afford it. Nobody's forcing you to, you know what I mean? I'd love to be able to book everybody all the time and help people all have fantastic weddings. But if it's not in your budget and you have no other means or way to change that, then it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Now I'm curious, just because I've been thinking about this. Travis, do you have any like Canadian questions for Neal and I that you're like, I have no idea about this, that we could answer for you? I just thought that might be fun.
I mean, the main thing was just location geographically. Like I had really no idea. I mean, I know like Canada is big, and what is it, like 40 million people are there or something, but it's like I only really ever hear about like maybe like Ontario, and that's like kind of it. Like I've had a few people like, oh, I have a wedding in Ontario that I'm traveling to or something, but no, like it's kind of cool, like having a bigger picture of like what it actually looks like geographically, because I just kind of picture like a few of these like big cities like Ontario and stuff, and then just like nothing. It's just like green lands and like, nothing like that. But it sounds like for the most part, it's pretty similar where it's like you have big city and then you kind of have like suburbs. And then of course you have like the country, but I mean, it's just like that is here too. So
the difference is we're really clean.
yeah,
That's the difference.
I've heard that. And, that makes me think of something too, like, because everything is more like whenever like I see pricing for stuff, it's always like different when it's like in Canada. And is there like what is the reason for that too? Like why something might cost more in Canada? Is it just the currency, like the exchange of it that usually causes that, or like what happens with that?
A lot of that stuff might, like, you mean like items?
Yeah, like
if
items.
it comes from, it could probably come from the States. So we've had to pay extra to bring it up, right? So the price of the exact same item will cost us more because we've had to pay a tariff or a tax just to bring it to Canada.
Yeah.
So that would be the number one thing. And then there's the fun thing of the dollar exchange, which is another topic.
Oh yeah, I could get into that for hours, but you're right. That's exactly it. If we have to bring it up from the States, we likely have to pay a tariff on it. So we have to charge that. And depending where it comes from, especially like if anything's coming from Europe, it's usually more expensive. But if say you're shipping pop up to Nunavut.
Soda is what she means.
Sorry, I forgot that you call it soda.
It's actually funny you say that because people in Chicago call it pop.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
But
I just jumped in
even farther than that. So, and there's like a lot of broken English you start finding too as you go more, like kind of like middle of United States. It becomes so like when I grew up, it was sody. So that's what people called it, was sody. And then when I moved up to Chicago, all I ever heard was pop. It's pop. I want to pop, like that. They were always saying pop. And then at that point I had upgraded from sody to soda when I realized it wasn't sody. So I'm a soda person, but like in Chicago, for whatever reason, it's pop. I think it was, yeah. And so
sorry,
I think
Stephanie, I totally jumped in and I jumped on your point about,
but there's there's like a transition that must happen as you start going north. It becomes pop or something, because like, I don't know where the sody thing came from. Cause that's a very like Midwest, like middle of, the United States, people will say sody. But then like when you go south, I feel like I hear soda a lot. So it's like it's transitioning from soda to pop, and then the sody, like the in between or something. Because I hear sody pop too. So maybe that's where the sody came from, is they would say sody pop and then it turned into sody. I don't know. But then a lot of people, it's just Coke. They just say Coke, even though like
no matter what
Dr.
the brand
Pepper
is.
Yeah.
So that's a big Caribbean thing. Like my people, as it were, it's Coke, but it's not Coke, it's Pepsi. Oh, but it's Coke. Yeah, we do that with a lot of brand names.
Yeah, we do that with a lot of brand names, like Kraft Dinner. It's Kraft Dinner. It's not mac and cheese. It's called, like, if I'm saying tonight we're making Kraft Dinner, that's what I mean. We're making mac and cheese. Like I don't think I've ever caught myself saying let's make mac and cheese. It's always Kraft Dinner. I don't know why, but
it's KD at my house.
KD or Kraft Dinner. Yeah, and I don't think I've ever called it soda before, ever. Like it's always
not
been
very
pop.
common. It's a weird somewhere like in the middle. It just like that became a thing, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not very common. It's usually
I have a
pop
brother
or
and
soda.
sister. I have a brother and sister in New York, so they're born and raised in New York. So a lot of things we catch when we were younger, they would be saying soda, and I'm like, it's pop, and they're like, we call it soda here. That's so funny like that.
I was saying to myself before we started this, I was like, I should keep my Canadian accent to a minimum, because sometimes I can get quite carried away with it.
Oh yeah.
Especially if I've had a few drinks. It's a pretty thick one. I don't know why.
Just regular Canadian?
Yeah,
see,
just like,
I don't feel like we have an accent, but then people in the States will tell me that, like, I went to 2019, I went to North Carolina, and people were like, where are you from? And then I was like, from Canada, and they were talking about my accent, and I was like, accent?
I know, and it's so funny because we're so similar, like US and States, but I find that we drop the T on most things. Like a lot of people think we say a boot, and that's not, like, I don't know. I've never
heard that.
Yeah, those are the only two that I know of, is A and a boot. Apparently, a boot is like a stereotype of like a what Canadians
See,
say, but I've never actually heard
I think
someone
that's
say
East
it.
Coast. That's
Yeah,
not us. That's
Yeah.
like that's the maritime provinces that say stuff like that. Like I see that on TikToks all the time, and I'm like, yeah, they do say that, but
yeah,
They
we
do. We
here,
don't.
yeah.
like in Ontario, I don't. I've never said a boot
Is
No,
it?
I've
Do you guys say bag or bag?
bag.
bag.
Okay, okay, because I don't know where that one. That's like a Minnesota thing or something, which is more
Oh,
Uh,
north. So I'm like,
yeah,
maybe that bleeds into Canada too, because they say bag. It really caught me off guard one time. They're like, because we went to like an apple farm and they're like, what size bag do you want? I'm like, what? A what? And then, what size bag you want? Oh, a bag.
I would like a bag, please.
I do find like I say a lot, but that's more of like it's a question mark. That's all it really is.
Yeah,
Like if I'm talking to my partner and he's like he didn't register what I said, I'll just go a, and then finally he'll catch on. It's just like a big question mark, really.
yeah.
Or
We
if I
have one
want
of
him
those actually in the Midwest too. It's do what? That's something like people in the Midwest will say sometimes. Like they don't understand what you say. And they're like, do what?
I
So
was
I
gonna say
actually
I've
kind
never
of like
heard that.
a better than do what. So I would prefer that actually. So
That's so funny. That I don't know. It's like I use it like a question mark, really.
yeah.
Um, I think we say someone told me once I was in where was I? I was in Barbados, and which I desperately miss right now. I'd love to be there.
I
And
hear that, sister. I hear that.
and there were people there from the UK who we made friends with, and she said, "Oh, you say oh yeah a lot," which I never realized I do. But if me and Neil were talking for long enough, we'd probably both say it.
Yeah, yeah, we
Like, oh
would.
yeah, oh
Yeah.
yeah. I could probably just say that for hours if you're just talking to me, but I never realized that was a thing I said. I just thought I was like acknowledging people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys pick up on the different like United States like accents? Because like we have
Yes.
Boston, there's like a Southern
Mhm.
accent. So you can pick up on those pretty quick then, I'm guessing, right?
Well, I
Yeah.
can definitely because my siblings are from New York, so their accents are serious New York accents. They're born and raised, and then um, I had a stepsister who lived in Boston as well, so I know that one really well too.
Yeah. I could tell the like difference, but I think I would have to be talking to them for a longer period of time. Like if you're
Hmm.
talking to Neil and I, we have like an Ontario accent, which is probably more tame than if you were on the East Coast. Like a Newfoundland accent, or a Newfie accent it's a lot
Different.
different. It's a
It's a
lot
lot of.
different.
That's something that you'd probably have trouble with, Travis. Is a
Yeah.
Newfie accent for sure.
We got to find
Even
something
I
like
do
that to bring on.
sometimes. I'm like, what?
I know. I'm like, wait, what? Say that again.
Say what?
So I wanted to kind of wrap up on kind of a bigger topic, something that didn't just affect Canada and the United States, but the whole globe. And that's with COVID and the coronavirus and just the lockdowns and everything that came with that. So I would love to kind of hear what it, backing up to last March up till now, obviously the shortened version, but just kind of what it was like for you guys. Did you find it was different in different areas of Canada, or was it all kind of pretty much the same? I would love to just kind of you guys to kind of share your experience going through that and working with weddings.
Wow, yeah, it's been a wild ride. It feels like here we're still pretty much in a lockdown. I'm in Kitchener-Waterloo, so we're still stuck even in a further lockdown than what Neil is right now. So Ontario's going through like a phased reopening, I think is what they're calling it now, even though they changed it a few times. Um, but starting in March, it was like I remember seeing it on the news and then being like, "Oh, weird, this like thing in Asia is just like overtaking it." And then all of a sudden it was like, "Stay home, do not leave your house, only go to the grocery store for like food." And then all of a sudden I wasn't working and I was like, "Whoa." Like that how am I supposed to process that? And then it kind of got a little bit better in the summer of last year. And then it got really bad again. So a lot of us, like in the events industry, have not worked since March of 2020. A few events here and there, like I did one wedding in 2020. And that was, they followed all the rules. They could have 50 people. And that was it. No dinner, no dancing or anything. You could have dinner at that point. We currently can't have receptions. But yeah, it's been pretty crazy. I'm really hoping by the end of this month, things are a little sorted, especially like I'm fully vaccinated now, which is lovely. And we're getting there.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys align pretty well with us here in Illinois up until like recently it kind of changed. So like now for context too, I mean, those in the state obviously know this, but for you guys too, everything for us has been very politically driven, unfortunately. So it's been, I mean, obviously everyone wants to come together and get through this, but a lot of it is political driven. So like they kind of will go a certain way, mattering if they agree or disagree with like that leader. So like, you know, for like, you know, for the longest time last year, all the states that were open sided with the president, all the states that were closed didn't. And it was like a thing of like, well, we're just going to do the opposite of what they say. So if they tell us to lock down, we're not going to lock down. We don't need a lockdown. But then if it was like, oh, they tell us to lock down, then we're going to stay open. And, you know, like it was just this like back and forth tug of war. And I even feel like the way that we've kind of come to an end this year is still kind of politically driven because they're trying to kind of paint a certain picture. And it's kind of a bummer because it would be nice if we could just all like kind of come together and get through this. And I feel like we could have got through it even a little faster, but it is what it is. You know, it's just the way it kind of went. But as far as, you know, on my side for Illinois, like it was a similar thing where March came around. I kind of saw that, okay, we're probably not getting out of this for a while, even though we were being told we would be out of it in like a month. I was like, I don't think that's happening. That's pretty optimistic. And surely enough, it kind of prolonged. And then just like for you guys in the summer, it actually kind of started going back to somewhat normal. So we were doing like a good amount of weddings. They were just small weddings. So, you know, like 50, 60 people. And then when winter rolled around, it was also like election time, and it's like everything just shut down hardcore in our state again. It was like 10 people or less, couldn't do anything. It was very locked down. So I had a lot of like October, November, December, a lot of like couples who thought they would move their date to get away from it. They all end up getting like rescheduled again because they were trying to be safe and do it in the winter, and winter became kind of a mess for us. And it was all of a sudden like in May, like all of a sudden everything just like was open, like wide open, like we're like no mask, we're like full capacity everywhere. It just was like we went from one extreme to the other. So we went from like totally locked down pretty much all the beginning of this year to like April, May. It's like, oh yeah, we're everything's back to normal. Like COVID never happened. It wasn't a thing, you know. And it was just kind of, it's been kind of weird. And like I'm not necessarily upset about it because it is nice to be able to work again, but it's just like, are we really that out of it, or is this just more political junk, you know, that they're trying to play? And so it's a little concerning because it's like I would hate to see like us end up getting locked down again because maybe like they were being a little too fast with things and then we get locked down. So
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely, in my opinion, it's quite political here. But that's just my 2 cents. But we have come together though.
yeah,
In like as a country, we really have. They've done a great job. But it can get quite political, at least in Ontario.
yeah.
How do you feel about that, Neil?
I concur wholeheartedly. I can. Everything you said it all, so I'm like, yeah, she's right.
Yeah.
It's exactly, like for me, what was it? We went away in January of 2020, because I always do that the first week of January to get away after the season and New Year's and stuff like that. So luckily we had that, and then I was planning in March to go to a DJ convention in Vegas, Mobile Beat, I kept looking at the calendar and watching the news, looking at the calendar and watching the news up until like the Friday before, and then it was like lockdown. That's it. We're not flying anywhere, because I was gonna go. I was like, I'm going, and then it was like, no, you can't go no place.
No, it
No,
was like
it was
you're
big
done.
lockdown, and I did. Prior to that, I had done a couple of corporate events, and that was it. And then nothing again until October. And I had people bumping, and it's sort of similar to what Travis was saying. I had people bumping and saying, "Oh well, in a month or two, in a couple of months, and in the winter, oh next year." So, and people, I've had some clients that have bumped 5 times.
Yeah, yeah,
You know
they
what I mean?
moved a lot because they just
And yeah, I'm like, I'm here with you. You know what I mean? If we can make it happen, I'm the last part, like the only part you don't have to worry about. I'm here with you, and I'll make it happen. And if I'm
yeah.
booked that day, I'll make sure you're covered one way or the other, and that sort of thing. So now we're into July. And so
Yeah.
my first gigs will be the end of July and the 1st of August, and we'll see if they
Yeah, here's
go.
hoping. I'd really like it to open up. That'd be
Yeah.
nice, and we could be just like Travis and super busy.
That's it. That's the plan, anyways.
It will happen eventually, I'm sure. Is there like an inconsistency in Canada, like like it was here, or is it pretty consistent throughout all of
It's
Canada?
inconsistent everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere it's
Inconsistent. Yeah.
inconsistent because people don't know, and we're going to follow the science, and this politician's going to say this, and so yeah, it's absolutely inconsistent, and I don't think there was any sort of handbook that could have prepared
No.
the people,
No.
the politicians, anybody, the scientists for what we've been gone through and what we're going to still deal with. So that's the unfortunate thing. And the masses, the people are like looking for some guidance from people who are sort of like literally they should just be standing there going, no, I'm not sure, because they really aren't sure. They'll tell you they're sure, but they're not sure.
Yeah.
So that's the Neal 2 cents.
Yeah. Well, here's hoping that you guys come August or September, you'll be doing so many weddings you won't be able to keep track. So
That's the goal.
yeah.
I need these weddings to be able to get back in shape. I lifted a speaker today. I was like, trying to put it up there.
You should have when everything locked down, you should have started like a YouTube channel for like workouts for DJs,
Shoulda, woulda,
instead of like
coulda.
squatting the bar, it's like squatting.
That's
the
exactly
speakers.
it. This is lifting speakers and yeah.
Well, I want to thank you guys for joining me. This was a lot of fun. It's kind of cool because I feel like for the most part, there's a lot of similarities, but it's cool like the little differences that you find, and just the fact that technically we're bordering each other, but there's still those little differences that come, whether it's with the language or with timelines or budgets and things like that. And so, yeah, I just want to thank you guys for being a part of this. Before we leave, is there anything you two are working on or anything you would love to share with other wedding vendors?
You can go ahead, Neal.
Ladies first. Always ladies first.
I'm not working on anything specific right now. After the summit that we all attended, I'm kind of working on just my own things, doing a few elopements right now. That's probably the biggest thing, is focusing on small micro weddings, because that's going to be a trend for a while. And I know people do want to party, but it's going to be freaky for a little while to get together with 200 of your closest friends. So really focusing on that niche market.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. Like, just want weddings to start.
Me too.
I just want to be able to work. I have things in the pot that they're cooking, but nothing per se right now. Just want to get to work. Eager to go out there, and I teach DJ classes. I really want those to start back up. I do a bunch of different things like that. So that's the plan, anyways.
One of these days, we're almost there, I think.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah,
This has been
thanks.
so
Absolutely.
fun.
Thanks for being a part of this, guys. And yeah, and like I was saying, I hope in a couple months, like I won't even be able to talk to you if I even try, because you're going to be having so many phone calls coming through. So
Oh, that exactly. It's true. It's gonna
Yes,
happen.
absolutely, absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thanks so much.
all right,
Thank you.
awesome. Till next time. See ya.
Okay, bye
Bye.
now.